The Young and the Restless spoilers. From the moment Mitch finally admitted the truth, that he was, in fact, Matt Clark, the world around him seemed to change shape, and so did he. The mask he had worn for so long began to crumble, revealing the man beneath, a figure both seductive and dangerous, capable of charm so convincing it could disarm even the most guarded soul. Once his confession was made, he stopped pretending to be the devoted husband Sienna had known. Instead, he transformed into someone consumed by unfinished desires, a man haunted by his past obsession with Sharon Newman. He began to reappear in her orbit under the pretense of reconciliation, always finding excuses to cross paths with her, at the coffee house, outside the hospital, even near her home. At first, Sharon tried to believe it was coincidence, but there was something in his eyes, an intensity that reminded her of another lifetime, the dangerous, twisted history they shared. For Sienna Bacall, the transformation was unbearable. The man she had married, the man she thought she understood, was vanishing before her eyes. He no longer spoke to her with tenderness or even frustration, he spoke with dismissal. He spent nights away, offering vague explanations about business or friends, but she knew the truth. The scent of another woman lingered on him, and she did not need to be told whose it was. Sharon. Always Sharon. Sienna's heart broke, but beneath the heartbreak came something sharper. Jealousy, then fury. The humiliation of being replaced, of realizing that her husband's confession had not freed him but instead rekindled an old obsession, filled her with a sense of betrayal so deep it made her tremble. One night, when he returned home late, she couldn't hold it in anymore. The confrontation erupted without warning. Tears streamed down her face as she demanded answers, her voice rising and falling in waves of pain. She wanted to know why he had chosen Sharon, why he had destroyed their marriage so casually, why he couldn't see the destruction he was leaving behind. Matt's eyes darkened as she spoke. There was no remorse, only irritation, as if her grief were an inconvenience. When she accused him of having an affair, he didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned closer, his voice low and venomous, warning her to keep quiet. "You don't know what you're talking about," he hissed. "And if you know what's good for you, you'll stop." It wasn't just a threat, it was a revelation of who he truly was. The warmth, the gentleness, the charm, all gone. What stood before her now was the ghost of a man who had long since lost his humanity to obsession. The fear broke her. Sienna packed a small bag and fled the house, tears blurring her vision as she drove through the dark streets toward the one person she could trust, Nick Newman. She arrived at his doorstep trembling, her voice barely a whisper as she confessed everything. The story spilled out between sobs. That Mitch had confessed to being Matt Clark, that he had become someone she didn't recognize, that he was obsessed with Sharon and had even started following her again. Nick listened in silence, every muscle in his body tightening as the pieces began to fit together. Sharon had mentioned feeling watched, a shadow in the distance she couldn't explain. Now it all made sense. Sienna clung to him, desperate for someone to believe her, to protect her. She admitted she had no idea that Mitch was Matt until he told her himself. By then, it was too late. His lies had bound her into his chaos. "He's not the man you think he is," she said through her tears. "He's dangerous, Nick. He's obsessed with Sharon. He keeps saying he needs to make things right between them, like she belongs to him." Nick's heart pounded. He knew Matt Clark's history, the manipulation, the vendettas, the psychological warfare. The thought that he was alive, living under another name, and circling Sharon again filled him with dread. But Sienna wasn't finished. Her next words froze Nick completely. She told him about the papers she had found hidden in Matt's study, envelopes, test results, DNA reports. Dozens of them. She didn't understand them at first, but when she saw the names Sharon, Noah, her blood ran cold. Matt had been collecting DNA samples, running private tests, cross-checking parentage. "He has Noah's name written all over those files," she whispered. "Nick, I think he believes he's Noah's father." The room fell silent. Nick felt the air leave his lungs. The idea was impossible, or at least, it should have been. Noah was his son, or so he had always believed. But Matt had always been there in the background, tangled in Sharon's past, manipulating from the shadows. Sienna sobbed harder, explaining how she had confronted Matt about the DNA tests, only for him to laugh. He had told her she wouldn't understand, that he was merely proving something, that soon everyone would know the truth. His words had terrified her. That was when she realized he wasn't just trying to rekindle an old flame, he was trying to rewrite the past. If he could prove that Noah was his biological son, he could destroy Nick and Sharon's family from the inside. It wasn't love driving him, it was possession. Nick's mind raced, torn between rage and disbelief. If what Sienna said was true, then Matt's return wasn't an accident, it was a calculated act of revenge. Every step, every encounter, every word he had spoken to Sharon was part of a larger design. And now Sharon was in danger, emotionally and perhaps even physically. Nick tried to calm Sienna, promising her protection, but his thoughts were already racing ahead. He needed to confront Matt before he could strike again. As the night deepened, Sienna sat trembling in Nick's living room, replaying the last months in her mind. Every lie, every unexplained absence, every time she had tried to convince herself that Mitch loved her. It all came crashing down into one horrifying truth. The man she had shared her life with wasn't just unfaithful, he was dangerous, deceitful, and obsessed with revenge. Her jealousy had turned into fear, her heartbreak into guilt. She realized she had been living beside a stranger who might be capable of anything. Meanwhile, somewhere in the city, Matt Clark looked out over the lights of Genoa City with a cold, satisfied smile. The game was far from over. Sharon's face lingered in his mind, her voice haunting him. He told himself it was love, but it wasn't. It was the twisted need to reclaim something he had lost decades ago. In his mind, Sharon still belonged to him, and no amount of time or truth would change that. The DNA results on his desk were the proof he needed, the ultimate weapon to destroy Nick and rewrite his legacy. Whether Noah was truly his son or not no longer mattered. What mattered was the chaos that revelation could unleash. And as Matt poured himself another drink, he whispered Sharon's name into the darkness, unaware, or perhaps entirely aware, that the reckoning he had set in motion was already closing in. For Nick, the truth had become a nightmare. For Sharon, it was a haunting echo of the past returning to claim her peace. And for Sienna, it was the death of every illusion she had ever held about love. The storm was coming, and this time it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about blood, identity, and vengeance that had waited too long in the dark to stay hidden any longer. Nick Newman had always considered himself a man who could weather any storm. He had faced betrayal before, survived heartbreak, and buried enough pain to last several lifetimes. But nothing could have prepared him for the shattering truth that fell from Sienna Bacall's trembling lips that night. She stood before him like a ghost, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying, her words breaking apart as she confessed what she had discovered about her husband, Mitch, or rather, Matt Clark, the man who had returned from the dead and embedded himself once again into the lives of the Newmans. When she told him that Matt had been hiding DNA reports linking himself to Sharon and Noah, Nick's world came crashing down. For a long moment, he couldn't speak, his body felt weightless, as if gravity itself had abandoned him. The idea that the boy he had raised, the son he had loved unconditionally, might not share his blood was too devastating to process. Without thinking, he reached for Sienna and pulled her into his arms. It wasn't romantic, it was human. They were both victims of the same cruelty, deceived by people they had trusted, discarded by those they had loved most. Sienna's sobs shook against his chest as she confessed how her husband had changed since revealing his true identity, how his obsession with Sharon had consumed him to the point of madness. Her words spilled out in broken sentences, how Matt had threatened her, how he had laughed at her pain, how he had spent nights away whispering Sharon's name as though it were a prayer or a curse. Nick held her tighter, not because he knew how to fix it, but because he finally understood what it felt like to lose everything without warning. The more she spoke, the more Nick's anger swelled. He could feel it rising from deep inside him, the kind of fury that didn't shout or break things, but burned slow and steady, the kind that ate through the soul until nothing was left but the desire for truth. He had believed in Sharon all his life. He had forgiven her countless times, convinced himself that love could erase the damage. But this was unforgivable. The thought that she had slept with Matt, that she might have carried his child and passed him off as Nick's, made his stomach twist in disgust. Every memory of their family life, Noah's first steps, his laughter, the nights Sharon had cried in his arms, replayed in his mind like a cruel film. Had it all been a lie? Was he just the stand-in, the fool who raised another man's son while Sharon hid the truth behind her soft eyes and gentle words? Sienna's words pierced through his fury, forcing him to focus. She told him that she had seen the DNA files herself, that Matt had hidden them under a false drawer in his office. There were multiple envelopes, each marked with names: Sharon, Noah, Nick. She hadn't dared to open them all, but the few she glimpsed suggested something unspeakable. He said he was proving something, she whispered, trembling. He said the truth would destroy everything. Nick's jaw tightened. The truth was already destroying everything. He pulled back, looking into Sienna's tear-streaked face. For a moment, he saw his own pain reflected there, the same betrayal, the same helpless rage. They were both broken, but from that brokenness came clarity. "We can't let him win," Nick said, his voice low, steady, almost frightening in its calmness. "We need proof. We need to expose them both." It wasn't just about vengeance anymore. It was about reclaiming what had been stolen from him, his dignity, his fatherhood, his peace. As the night deepened, they began to plan. Sienna would help him retrieve the DNA reports, using her knowledge of Matt's office layout and the security codes she still remembered. Nick would confront Sharon only when he had undeniable evidence in his hands. He couldn't afford to accuse her based on emotion alone. He needed facts, something that couldn't be dismissed as jealousy or anger. Still, the thought of looking Sharon in the eyes again made his blood run cold. He didn't know what he would see there: guilt, fear, or perhaps something worse, indifference. He spent the next hours pacing the room, unable to rest. Memories flooded him like waves: Sharon holding Noah for the first time, the tears in her eyes as she called him our son. He remembered how fiercely he had loved her, how he had believed that no matter what mistakes they made, they would always find their way back to each other. Now, every tender memory felt like a blade twisting in his chest. If what Sienna said was true, Sharon hadn't just betrayed him once, she had built an entire life on deceit. The realization broke something inside him that might never heal. Sienna sat quietly nearby, watching him. Her fear had turned into grim determination. She had spent too long living in Matt's shadow, too long convincing herself that he would change. Now she knew better. She wasn't the same woman who had cried for his attention, she was someone who had been forged in pain, someone who needed justice. Together, they would drag the truth into the light, no matter how much it hurt. When the first light of dawn crept through the blinds, Nick finally spoke. "We'll go tonight," he said. His voice was rough from hours of silence. "We'll get those files, and we'll end this." Sienna nodded, her hands shaking. She knew what this meant. Matt would not forgive such a betrayal, and if Sharon discovered what they were doing, she might try to stop them too. But there was no turning back. The lies had gone too far. That night, as they approached Matt's office, the tension was suffocating. Sienna led the way, her eyes darting nervously toward the security camera above the door. She entered the code with trembling fingers, and the door clicked open. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of cologne and stale bourbon. The office was immaculate, every surface gleaming, every file perfectly arranged, a reflection of the man's obsessive nature. They moved quickly, searching the desk, the cabinets, the walls, until Sienna's hands found the hidden latch beneath the bottom drawer. Her breath caught as the drawer lifted, revealing a stack of sealed envelopes. Nick reached for the top one and froze. His name was written on it in Matt's precise handwriting. Beneath it were others: Sharon, Noah. His heart hammered as he opened the first envelope. Inside were medical records, DNA analyses, and test results that made his hands tremble. The truth was staring back at him in black and white. The tests compared his DNA with Noah's, and the result was clear. No match. He felt the air leave his lungs, his vision tunneling until all he could see were the letters stamped across the page: paternity excluded. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The world went silent. Every heartbeat was an echo of betrayal. Sienna's gasp pulled him back. She was holding another envelope, this one labeled Matt Clark, Noah Newman. The result was there too, cruel and undeniable: paternity confirmed. The room tilted around him. His hands shook as rage surged through his body, too powerful to contain. Sharon had lied. For years, she had looked him in the eyes, called him Noah's father, and let him live a lie. He thought of all the times he had protected her, forgiven her, defended her even when others warned him to stay away. And all along, she had known. Sienna grabbed his arm, her voice trembling. "We have what we need," she whispered. "Let's go before he comes back." But Nick didn't move. He stared at the documents, at the evidence that had just rewritten his entire life. A part of him wanted to storm out, confront Sharon immediately, demand to know how she could do this to him. Another part of him wanted to find Matt and end it right there, to make him pay for every ounce of pain he had caused. But beneath the fury, there was something else, an emptiness, a grief so deep it felt endless. They left before midnight, taking only what they needed. As they drove through the empty streets, Sienna stared straight ahead, her tears silently falling. She had lost her husband to madness, Nick had lost his son to lies. They were two people bound together by devastation, moving toward an uncertain reckoning. When Nick finally returned home, he stood in the doorway, staring at the family photos on the wall, smiling faces frozen in time, unaware of the truth that would one day destroy them. His hands trembled as he removed one photo of Sharon and Noah, their arms wrapped around him in a perfect illusion of happiness. He looked at it for a long moment before placing it face down on the table. He knew what he had to do. Tomorrow, he would confront Sharon. Tomorrow, he would demand answers. But tonight, he allowed himself to feel it all: the betrayal, the rage, the heartbreak. Everything he had believed in was gone, replaced by a single, burning truth: blood didn't always define a family, but betrayal did. And when morning came, Sharon and Matt would finally face the man they had turned into an enemy. Nick Newman was done being the fool. Now, he was the reckoning they never saw coming.